Howdy folks, Inquisitor Ethan here. Instead of the usual mid-conclave profile on Cinemania, today's episode is something a little different. After we got bunged into the clink, Verifier Andy continued to pursue the case of stamping out Cinemania, and heroically, rather than use his one phone call to contact an attorney to bail us out, Verifier Andy instead conducted an interview of the legendary grimdark artist Ian Miller, who, if you've been keeping track, contributed background illustrations to Wizards, which was the film we were scrutinizing at the time. In case you're just joining us, Ian Miller is a visual artist who is best known for the Realms of Chaos illustrations he did for Games Workshop and their Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer 40,000 universes. He's also known for his cover illustrations on H.P. Lovecraft reprints and backgrounds for various animated features such as Cool World. Presented here for your trembling ears is Verifier Andy's interview in its entirety. Please enjoy.
Movie has cancelled my existence.
Oh, don't worry about that. No one's getting cancelled. I'm the nervous one. I've never done an interview before. So Ethan.
Well, then don't worry about it. We'll just stumble along. By the way, I haven't had a chance to sit down and read your strip yet, but I like the general look of it. I've got a pile of stuff to read tomorrow, so I'll pay it a little more attention tomorrow.
Oh, that'd be great.
Thanks for sending it.
It literally. Yeah. I woke up from a bizarre dream one day and just started drawing that thing, and it came out okay. So I made it into a little comic.
Yeah. Well, I sent it. I hope you don't mind. I sent it to a friend yesterday, who I was talking to on Wednesday, and he's very much into that sort of thing. So I just
wow.
Told him. So we'll see. Obviously, I'll see. At some point, get a response from him. So.
Oh, cheers! That's brilliant. Thanks.
Yeah, it's all right. Anyway, you do. Where do you want to start?
Well, so we look at weird films and strange films and things like that, and we watched Wizards, the Ralph Bakshi film, and obviously you did a lot of work on this, and it is a weird one. I have to say we had a lot of mixed feelings about it. It's very bizarre, very strange, and some of it we were going, yeah, we love that. Other bits we're going, what on earth were they smoking the whole time? And it's but that's what you want really from a strange film. But the guys we all got together and we decided we'd think of some questions to ask because obviously your work is very noticeable on the film. You can immediately see. It sort of moves into bits that you did the backgrounds for and you did bits on. You can tell instantly, oh, right, here's Ian Miller coming up. Here's your stuff. So I wanted to know, how did you get involved in that whole scene? Because Bakshi was part of this underground comics movement and very much part of... go on.
Yeah. Well, it was very interesting because obviously I was at St Martin's in London in the late 60s doing a painting degree. And I remember going to see Fritz the Cat at a cinema, no longer exists, near Piccadilly. And that was my first, obviously I knew of Crumb, but that was my first, was it Fritz the Cat? No, it was Crumb I think I went to see, or was it Fritz the Cat? Anyway, one of those films. And so that was my introduction to Ralph Bakshi. And then you go and see it, and you think, "Oh Christ, that was good." And then you never think anything else about it. How I came to get involved? I'd been commissioned by a publishing house, by Ballantine Books, to work on a fantasy calendar, and I was asked to do a Gormenghast illustration for the fantasy magazine because I'm a great fan of Melvin Peake, and which I did. The calendar was duly published, and at the same, just after that, my wife and I went on holiday to see some of her sister in California, and it was a time when everything was the pound was crashed. So anyway, the upshot, cut to the chase, we ended up down and out in San Francisco, and we had 3 months to wait before we get our plane back. So we lived in a place called the Gaylord Hotel, just close, not too far from Union Square, and that was a very interesting introduction to San Francisco in the in the early 70s, and with no money or anything, but it was a very exciting time. And we were living in the Gaylord, and the great feat was on a Sunday. You got free donuts and coffee.
Oh, brilliant!
And I went down one on. It was on a Sunday, and I went down to get my donuts and coffee. We both did. And the chap behind the counter said, "Oh, there's a message for you from come in from LA from Ralph Bakshi Productions." And I thought, "Oh, well, that name rings a bell." So anyway, it just said ring LA. So I duly rang, and Ralph's secretary said, "You know, we want to fly you down to LA straight away." You know. And so it was a bit funny because we were sitting in Grace Cathedral, you know, kind of the day before, listening to the organ music and going to the Ghirardelli. So I said, well, you know, anything had to be better than what we were doing in this hotel. So we duly flew down. They put us up in the farmer's market, just near farmer's market in one of the hotels there. And I went into the Ralph's studio, and it was then, I think it was on, he was not too far from Hollywood Boulevard, La Cienega, I think it was. But anyway, I walked in, and we were taken out to dinner, and I was offered a job on the spot. Ralph had decided, having seen this calendar depiction of Gormenghast, that I was just what he needed. And apparently, one of his top animators. John Sperry, who was, you know, kind of worked on Tom and Jerry, had seen it and shown it to Ralph, and Ralph at that point, you know, so it was a done thing basically. He said, "When can you start?"
Oh, great! Didn't
I said, "Well, we've got to go back first," and I said, "Well, I've got to go back." I said, So suddenly we went from a rather sort of what the happens next to this. Of course I said yes. So we came back, and then they did all the paperwork, you know, and all the then sort of the work permit stuff. And Julie, you know, not too long after, I was back in the studio in my own little cubbyhole with a green woody woodpecker desk, blinds drawn, you know, kind of. And Ralph said, "Just do what you want."
Great.
He told me what he wanted.
So You started with this Gormenghast calendar. Didn't Mervyn Peake work as an illustrator during the war?
Yes, he did. You know, he was, and he taught. Yeah, so I mean, you know, I've always been a great fan of Mervyn Peake. I mean, not only as his you know, as an artist, but also as a writer. I mean, Gormenghast is probably one of the definitive sort of fantasy tales. I don't know if you read Gormenghast.
Well, I mean, I've tried. I was a bit young when I tried to read it, and it was too much for me. I got through about a chapter of it, and I was very young, you know, pre-teen, I think. And it was a bit heavy for me. I came back to it later, and I sort of appreciated it more, but I didn't have a brilliant first introduction to it.
I can get there with that. I can see that it is a bit, you know, kind of personality and character heavy. So, I mean, you've obviously got to... I mean, it was just the whole Gothic, you know, kind of nature of the castle and so forth, the mystery of it. So, because of my upbringing,
you're Mr. Gothic, basically, aren't you? Really?
Yeah. And I just love the idea of castles and this sort of amorphous quality to it. You know, and I'd been asked by the Peake Society to write about an artist's impression of Gormenghast. So that was about how amorphous it is. You know, it's sort of how, you know, the confines and the actual layout of it. It was just a transport of the mind in many respects. So you could be whatever you wanted it to be.
Personally, I hate castles. They're very hard to draw, and you have to get all the flying balustrades and everything right, and it's an absolute nightmare. Can't stand architecture. It's real. I always try and get away with doing as little background work as I can, and then your stuff, your backgrounds, especially in Wizards, have these enormous geometric detail and repeating patterns and anything. I'm looking at that thinking, oh my God, this must have taken forever. And I can't...
Well, they did, yes, they did. Some of the castles, when I was waiting, I was up north, and in fact, my mother was in Timperley. She was. So I was in the garage in Timperley, and then in the bedroom just tuning away on these Gormenghast drawings. You know, and it was just because there was absolutely no sort of restriction. I mean, the restrictions did come later in the film when I was having to draw to fit established animation. But then essentially I was just left to left to get on with it, And Ralph used to be there all the time, always with your shoulder. But I mean, he was just brilliant in that respect. I mean, it was just he found his people, and then he just let them, do what they wanted to do, and obviously until such time.
I know Bakshi has a bit of a reputation for being someone to work with who isn't always the easiest personality, and I'm saying that gently.
But yes, I mean, he does have his dissenters. I mean, the thing was that Ralph's wife thought I was I was the dark side of Ralph. I was this little sort of, demonic, kind of alter ego version of Ralph.
Right. So yeah, you must have found.
I've actually got a picture in the drawer where Ralph drew me as an evil little golem,
Right. So a bit of a kindred spirit in a way, then.
Yeah. So I mean, there was, and of course, we got on very well, and it just seemed to work, because when I went back to work for him, and later a later film, Cool World, he couldn't understand why I wasn't aggressive like I used to be. And I said, because he said, you used to be such an aggressive, kind of angry person. I said, because I've been doing kendo for the N years. And I said, I've been banged on the head so many times with a stick that it's all been knocked out of me.
Oh, so that's the secret, is it? That's the secret to inner peace. Get someone to smack you in the face with a stick.
Yeah, but he was just, it was, I think it's only now really, kind of looking back, that I'm almost more appreciative of that period now than I actually was. You never sort of, you do the best you can at the time, and then you think, my God, I could have done so much more. But of course, you can only do what you can do at the time in terms of, your experience and your generally how you feel, your state of being. So it was, for my wife and I, it was like literally being thrown into the deep end. I often compared it to, the kind of the artist version of trench warfare.
Right.
You lived every second of it. You were living on your nerves, but my God, it wasn't boring.
It must have been incredible. I mean, just looking at the results, the things that must have been going through everyone's minds, and the substances that must have been going through everyone's minds from the looks of it. But,
Ralph. Yeah, Ralph is, kind of. If Ralph, Ralph was not a person to get on the wrong side of. He's he was a very strong. But I never actually had that problem with Ralph. But yes, some people, they will, kind of didn't. But he because he's an artist, and he just gave a license to go. And I was at one point throwing things in the bin, so that's not good enough. So they'd come around and take that. We can use that.
Well, he was doing something very new, though, because a lot of the attitude he brought to it and the techniques he brought to it being used in new ways and doing different things. So it must have seemed like he was coming up with crazy ideas that just go against what you would normally do in an animated film to an extent.
I didn't have any idea about what I was supposed. I think the part of the thing was that I wasn't, obviously I could see what was going on around me, but I didn't actually have a preconceived idea of what I was supposed to do. Ralph just said, do it, do that. That's what I want. Just do more and more of that. And there were people around me, and there was, kind of Mike Plug, who worked on the film too. He was a comic artist, good. He was all an established comic artist doing, Planet of the Apes and Conan and so forth. And that was a great counterpoint for me, meeting somebody that was a little more versed in the mechanisms. But I never felt restricted. I mean, I felt sometimes, it just seemed that the vents were open, and you could basically, I just drew essentially, and that's. I don't think I've ever had that license since.
Really?
Well, I don't think it happens very often because I'm sure you're aware now, because I've worked on other films since then. Where they want more control, they don't actually. They want everything storyboarded, and they're trying to. It's got to be this way. It's got to be that way. I never really had that type of license, and I think Ralph, part of his strength was he spotted people that that had something maybe a little different, and he allowed them to go with that. I think. So I think that was a very interesting aspect of it, the way he operated. And I just recently looked at Fritz the Cat again. I bought And I suddenly realized, even now, it's just so, kind of some things you saw years ago, and you look at it and say, well, that's a bit dated. But if you look at something like Fritz the Cat, it's so exciting still visually. And these counterpoints, the way the beat changes, it's a very, very powerful, the way he animates, you never quite know what's going to happen next. And I just think if only there was a bit more of that now. There may well be. I can appreciate Pixar, but it seems to me that every animation company now seems to just want a Pixar lookalike. There's the same sort of modeling, same sort of faces.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I can see there is a style that's sort of settled on animation. You do see a lot of the same ideas.
And I think that's why Ralph is so relevant, even more so because people are rediscovering his films. They're going back and looking at them, and they're thinking, God, that's the things that are happening there. The sort of the counterpoints. It's like a really, kind of a fugues and something musical. It's heavy rock, it's jazz, it's everything all mixed up.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely an influence that came after that period, and after that film specifically, but after that whole era of the sort of the underground comics scene and these strange animations, because then you get heavy metal, and both the comics and then the film heavy metal that came out, which seems to owe a debt to these sort of crazy.
It was a very exciting, time. I mean, it was just because everybody was pushing the boundaries. And I think, then the corporations got involved and, tried to, take it over and sort of, and of course, it's like they put they squeeze the arterial flow, as it were, because it has to fit into the, into the system. And I found that sort of freedom is rare to find. When I went back to work on a film in Vancouver recently, I was amazed just how controlled and almost sweatshop the situation was in what people couldn't do. And I very quickly realized that, I shouldn't be there, because I didn't feel there's anything I could offer. I think that Ralph is still a force, and I think people have become more appreciative of that. Anybody that sees what he does, it's they're always, you never hear, you think, my God, I don't know how many of Ralph's films you've seen.
I've seen a few of them, and also the influence has seeped into the kind of films I see as well. Because I've definitely seen a lot of films where, looking back at things like Wizards, you think, oh, that's where that came from. That's where that idea sort of started. So I've seen his influence as much as I've seen his work. If you see what I mean.
Well, I mean his roller scope. I've just done some the couple of a poster for it's the heat, this thing of the night, and it's just come out, and it's very much Bakshi influenced, Ralph influence, because they used the roller scoping that he brought to the fore, and it's the parallels are so strong, but it's quite exciting. And these are new kind of aspiring animator directors in New York now. So there is a force out there that are trying to still something different. I mean, I just I think it was open ended. I think, and that was a great aspect.
No, it's interesting because there's, as you say, there's a lot of control. There's a lot of money, and money always brings control floating around. But at the same time, there's a lot of new ideas and new tools coming out where people can do stuff for themselves and on their own. Anyone can just stick a little film up on YouTube anytime they want now, and there are people just doing their own thing. And most recently, people have started using these AI art programs that you can type something in, it'll create a picture. Have you had any knowledge of this? Does that shock you? Or a lot of artists are really sort of up in arms.
Well, I haven't personally indulged it myself, but I've made obviously in certain small films. I did something a couple of years ago with a Dutch friend called Windig, and he ran his own animation company, and we did a little short called Jacob's Lament, which then went under Vimeo, and he, he's a very, very good, kind of digital animator. and he just took a lot of my imagery. And we made this little short based on a poem I'd written, and then we found a musician in Berlin. So it's easy to do that if there's a will.
Yeah.
And it worked. So, you ought to look it up in the thing and have a look at it just if you're interested.
No,
it's just called Jacob's Lament. And it should be still out there on Vimeo. But I haven't personally sort of sat at my computer and played with. But I'm just actually now about to start work on some elements for a French director's film. So there are people. I mean, I know what I can do. I mean, if I ever thought I was a Renaissance man, I'm quite quickly I wasn't. I think you get through it. I do. I know what I want to do, and I have a far wider remit than people normally know about. I work in all sorts of mediums, but most of what I do that people know me for is the very sort of tight, sort of banknote sort of style. And I really, I have enough to do just exploring the sort of the shelves inside my own dark cupboard, really.
I know, yeah, I know what you mean. It's easy to think you're branching out into something new, and you end up just exactly doing the thing that you really want to do all along, and coming back to the same ideas.
I believe that, I'm, in saying that, I don't believe that one should, kind of find something. The kind of the whole creative process is to continually extend the process.
Yeah.
Always be looking for new challenges. So that is the point. So it is the only constant is change. So I'm always looking to evolve styles, evolving sensitivities in what I do. But I actually, strangely enough, for some years I spent quite a lot of time playing on my with the Mac and so forth. And I'm a great fan of computers. I'm not one of these coffee book table. They're a brilliant tool. But I've tended to come back to the more traditional forms of sitting at a drawing table with pen and ink and drawing.
Yeah.
Although I do use the computer a lot for scanning images and manipulating them that way.
Yeah, because I use a graphic tablet most of the time now, where you're drawing it, and it's because I love having the control over things like color, because I used to hate thinking, I've got this red pen, for example, and it'll be slightly different red every time I use it, and the ink will eventually fade, but you can say, I want this exact red, it'll always be this red on the computer, and I love having that level of control. I almost like the mechanical nature of it, because I hate thinking that something is ephemeral and it just exists on one piece of paper and then eventually it'll rot away. So,
well, I think the thing is that's the big argument, what I used to call the coffee book argument about whether digital art, what it all boils down to ultimately is possession. Because people want to possess the original. And it doesn't make anything, the digital images, any less valuable or brilliant.
Yeah.
But of course, once it's digitized, it can be printed. There is no sense that there is one. It's just out there, all these dots and the pixels floating around. But to have the bit of paper with thumb marks on it and pen marks and dentured, there's something about that people just want to own. The only one. And I get that. I don't have any problem with that at all.
I've always been a bit nervous about that idea, just because every time I own a unique thing, I always think, what if I break it? What if I lose it or something? I think there's something comforting about something mass-produced, where you think, well, there's always going to be 100,000 more of it, so I can mess with this and fiddle with it and mess it up.
I think those lines have got a bit smudged now, because most people actually scan now. When I was started out, it used to be 4 or 5 trannies that cost an arm and a leg, so you didn't do it. So you had no actual record of the work. The amount of work, that just went, because there was no good way, unless you were prepared to pay about 40 quid a pot to get a really good 4 or 5 tranny shot.
I mean, that sounds so nerve-wracking to think that there's one of this, and the shot has to be right, and it's going to be expensive to reproduce. It's a very different way of thinking to nowadays, where things can be reproduced so much more easily.
Yeah, I think it's a, I think it's just a point of view. I have no issue that people are going to. It's whatever actually works for you. I don't. These aren't sort of. It's not a discussion that I think. Well, yeah, that's cool. I get that. I can go with that. I've never really thought about the question of it. I mean, the impermanence of life anyway. Kind of thing. If a drawing gets things, say again. That's a bit of a bugger. I mean, I used to have these burn boxes when I had an agent in Washington, and I used to just sort of shit, and, kind of in the bin it would go. And then she said to me, every time you have this desire to rip something up and throw it in the bin, just put it in a box and send it to me.
Really?
I can sell it.
Oh, my God.
Every month or two, I'd fill a box with all the things that I couldn't stand looking at, and then post it off to Washington, and she would just sell it. So it was a sort of an income. So, and the whole thing, the perception of, kind of what, but these are periods you go through. You just sort of, you're finding out it's the frustrations. I think, but just to get, to sort of relate back slightly more to the film, well, the problem I had after working for Ralph was, and seeing my stuff going into an animated situation, when I got back and was just thrown back into what's called the stills world, everything, it created an immense frustration because I'd seen the potential for things moving. So then I tried to, when I was drawing, sort of find all sorts of graphic means of electrifying them, so they looked as if they were moving, although it was only one one
right.
field. And so that set up a very, very perverse sort of. Sometimes I used to get very angry to be looking at this and saying, it should be moving. It should be moving. So, but in a way, that probably empowered and made me think about how can I operate surfaces and interchange, and that's why I love Kandinsky, because and even the idea, the strange harmonics you get in images, which are so. I mean, Pater said that all art moves to a state of music, and it's very true. The counterpoints of colour. And when I used to teach, I used to talk about the speed of individual lines, the way the eye moves along a line. When you draw with a rapidograph, which is a mono line, it's sometimes flat lines. But if you're using a dip pen, where the thickness of the line oscillates almost, then the visual, the sort of the visceral reaction to that line is completely different.
Oh yeah, so adding a tiny bit of weight to a line can totally change the density of an object. Yeah.
So the thing is that you sort of create this. There is this inherent harmonic in the drawing, in the way the lines are the lines are interacting with each other, and kind of trying to draw. Don't use lines; they're not necessary. Some people say don't use them, but and all of that came back to this whole idea of this sense of animation, sort of animation frozen in time, and so for that's always been an element of. I never lost that sort of interest in trying to find in the way I created a picture, the sense of movement, or just some areas where the sort of people had to stop and think, well, what's happening there?
Yeah. It's interesting. You can immediately tell where that's missing as well. I mean, it's hard to describe when it's there, but if it's not there, you immediately can see if something looks static.
Absolutely. I mean, I think lots of imagery. One of my lecturers used to say, the artist, the technician stops where the artist begins, and that was something that one of the sort of mantras we had to, And I think that what it is, you can have something which is absolutely technically brilliant, but it's deadlines. It's stillborn. You look at it, you think it's beautiful. Technically, it's beautiful, but it's not breathing.
Yeah, like a blueprint.
It's inert.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing. There's no beat. There's no pulse to it. And sometimes somebody will, counterpoint some beautiful bit of drawing with just which might, the cousin's thing, the blotesque, a smudge. And the two resonate together, and the eye and the sort of sensitivity-wise, you go, God, that works, and you see images, and there's instant connection. You think, oh, why is it?
No, I know exactly what you're talking about. Sometimes I'll be trying to think of an image, or I'll look at an image and I'll just think, yeah, that works, that doesn't work. And you can't tell why exactly, but there's something about some images that just works. And it's like you say, with music,
well, I think sometimes
the beat has to be right.
Well, sometimes it's important not to ask that question. And I think that's one of the big mistakes. People are always trying to rationalize when something's a visceral response to something, an emotive response. It can be passion. And I think people end up being hamstrung because they're trying to analyze, they're trying to sort of break it down into its component parts to understand it. Well, there is some value in that, but I think that can be very dangerous. I think you just say, I like it, therefore that's fine. It's the old Occam's razor, you know. Are you familiar with Occam's razor?
Oh yeah, taking away all that's it's not necessary to leave behind.
Yeah, and sometimes, you know, if it's working for you, I mean, obviously, you know, some people would I've got to understand why I like this. I think that was also going into galleries and copying masters.
Well, Occam's razor is all very well, but if you try using it on an egg, you end up with a mess.
Yeah. So, you know, there's all sorts of... so you find that each, you know, influences... So the film, you know, had a... And I never really... you know, it was always becoming... I've always remained friends with Ralph. We communicate, and he was going to try and make Wizards 2 not long ago.
Oh yeah.
I think it was I think Black Horse wanted to do it. It was Black Horse or one of the comic people. And I think what happened was it looked like it was really going to go, and he was getting Mike back in because Mike's brilliant. And I think that, you know, just they like corporations do. I think they just wanted to take control of the script. And I think Ralph's attitude was, it's my idea, my film.
Fair enough.
I do it my way. I know no way at all. And I think that basically, you know, kicked it into the long grass. But it was really sad because it would have been a lot of fun, you know.
No, that's fair enough. I mean, it should either be done right or don't bother.
Yeah.
Now, I do have to ask about Warhammer a bit, and I'm sure you get a lot of nerds going on you about Warhammer, because I love it. And I grew up with it, and especially in the sort of 80s and 90s when things were very grey and drizzly up north, Warhammer, especially the futuristic Warhammer 40,000 stuff, was just this window into a world of extremes where anything could happen and everything was bigger and bolder and better. And you were a huge part of that, because you basically created the look for this thing that started as a board game, and now... I don't know how much of it you've seen, but there's so much stuff that's erupted out of that. There's films and series and games and all sorts still going. And it's all owing a debt to the work you did back...
Well, strange enough, I'm just working on somebody, John Robinson. We're creating a whole set of models based on my designs. They're I don't know if you've seen them or you've heard of them. Cosmetic Meld. We did a Kickstarter, and they're all being made in Edinburgh now and shipped out, I think. But we're going to be selling those all based on all the designs that I've done. He's a great sculptor, so he's just sculpted it all. Those will be available.
How does it feel to see something that you created that started very small? I mean, it was originally a very small operation, and now it's become this. How do you view the?
Well, I think when I went to I knew John Blanche because we'd worked on Tolkien together on the Tolkien Vestry, and I think that I was just invited to go up and just go see John, and I met Brian Ansell, who was the powerhouse. I mean, behind the whole thing. A very great. You know, he had knew exactly what he wanted, and I have to say, I suppose if I was looking for a close runner to Wizards and to Ralph, Brian gave me the same sort of... John then, who was the art director, gave me the same license, and because it was a world. Although I wasn't a gamer and I wasn't into painting models, it was an easy world for me to step into. I didn't find it at all difficult to sort of start drawing, and I enjoyed it immensely. It was a really good time, and I just it was a knock on, I suppose, from Wizards really, because I'd been dealing, and I'd done the Tolkien thing when I came back from from America, working on Wizards. I did the Tolkien bestiary, so I was already steeped in sort of gnomes and orcs and Tolkien-esque sort of imagery, and the transposition, was pretty easy, and it just happened very naturally. And initially it was quite a nice time. Like all these things, I think it was still very much a bit of a cottage industry. They had all these sort of young, kind of loose cannons coming in and producing brilliant work. And then I think as it grew, and this is only my sort of take on it. It's not, historically. I think once the banks and big money got involved, then it had to be run more like with the time clocks and everything.
Yeah.
And then it all got a bit more regimented and so forth. But my time there, I had a pretty, kind of creatively, I was given free license, and then I started GW. I became the sort of commissioning editor for GW Books, which was going to be an offshoot of Games Workshop's, general thing, and set up offices down in Brighton. That was, kind of, we got a few books out, and then that sort of, I don't know, these things sometimes things, the lines get smudged and there's misunderstanding. And then one day, I just wasn't working for Games Workshop anymore, but it was a reasonably amicable, departure. I think when you get a lot of creative people, sometimes it can turn, it can become a bit edgy and poisonous. So there are all sorts of things going on, which are probably best left as historical.
Yeah, fair enough.
But it was nice. I still talk to John and so forth, and I'm talking to, still talking. Well, Brian's not very well at the minute, but his wife, so forth. So, and obviously, I was quite surprised that it has become so important, because it didn't seem so at the time.
It's weird how it touched a nerve. Just this idea of insanely fantastical gothic technology and horror just hit a nerve for some reason. But it did feel like this was the time for it back in the day. I remember when I was a kid. This is in the early 90s. And my first real introduction to this stuff, they made a computer game based on Space Hulk, and I got it. I didn't really understand it. I was too young to really play the game. But the manual that came with it had all these illustrations and pictures of these amazing armored warriors fighting terrifying creatures and these huge cathedral-like battleships in space. And the game I don't really remember that much of. It was crude by today's standards, very primitive game, but the pictures and imagery, I just felt, oh my God, this is what I want. I want to live in this world where everything is huge and fantastical and amazing, and nothing is small and drizzly anymore.
No, I mean, there were just so many brilliant people work for games, probably still do, in fact. I mean, and it was just this sort of flow, this real flow of imagery. I mean, the enthusiasm for it. I mean, and as you're probably more aware than I am, I mean, there's this massive sort of, it's such a massive industry. People just love the whole idea of painting models and so forth in the world and the game playing. I mean, I just find it quite mind-boggling sometimes, just the intensity of it. But strange enough, I'm involved. I'm almost involved, but I'm almost sort of outside of it. So I have a strange, my perspective of it is possibly, I've never really thought about what the perspective is, but it's a world which, is obviously fascinating and enjoyable. John was mainstayed. I mean, he became the sort of iconic, kind of, I suppose John Blanche is seen as some sort of guru now as far as Games Workshop, is concerned. I mean, he's, and that's very nice. He's gone on producing, kind of really exciting stuff. So, by default, we're still around and we're still producing. So that's.
Long may it continue, because I think the world needs more craziness and ideas that don't really fit.
I'm working on a game now with a with a chap that wants to reintroduce that an RPG, I think was the game, that wants to introduce that field. So we did a Kickstarter with a tarot pack together recently, and so he's got this sort of game that he's created. So I'm signed up to that. I don't quite know whether it's going to go, when it'll pick up again, if indeed it does. But it's a nice thing to have sort of the simmering in the background.
You never know what's going to resonate with people and take off. And like you say, always changing, always new things. You never know. Sometimes something you never even thought of will turn into something huge like this. Yeah.
Well, we're just, there's of course the graphic novels that kicked into that with the city, and perhaps the one I like the most, the Luck in the Head. So they were also sort of extensions of the whole process, going into, because when I was a child, my mother worked in the theatrical milliner, so I very much always drew with the idea that I was drawing stills for a film or a storyboard. So I've always had that idea that the cinematic, the filmatic idea of one image following another.
Yeah.
So it's an easy, it's a comfortable place for me to be, an easy place, a challenging place. So it's and sometimes it's doing is more important than trying to work out why. I think the reasons they usually, you usually get an idea of why you're doing it. They evolve, but I think people get so hamstrung, and you get this inverted pyramid of ideas. So top heavy with reason and concept that they don't ever actually get to the point of actually picking a tool up and making a mark.
I think you're definitely right there. No, absolutely, because I've started things and thought I was doing one thing and it turned into something else entirely. I'm sure a lot of people have. And you do have to open yourself up to the idea that a mistake or a chance or fortune will happen, and suddenly you're working on something that has a different meaning to what you ever expected.
Well, I think that's the creative process. I think what happens, you start off with an idea, then you dictate whatever it is you're medium you're working in. You dictate to the plate or the paper, and then the paper or the plate or the field begins to dictate back. And then it's that interplay, because you can see things that worked as an idea. Suddenly, when you've got a field, depth of field, colours, it doesn't work as well as the idea did. And so once you get that interplay, and then, the idea is talking to you, you're talking to the idea. And you need to, the most successful things are when you don't say, my ideas, that's what I thought it should look like, and that's how it's going to look, whether it works or not. And I think once you enter that sort of, it's almost like a fluid process, and go with the flow. And that's why I work in what I call a freefall style now. I never know what's going to happen. I have the idea and I draw it, but now I just go with it. And when I'm commissioned now, people tell me basically what they talk about. They give me ideas of what they imagine. The vision that they have, what they would like to see, what elements. Sometimes ask them what colours they don't like. And then I say, okay, well, I understand basically what sort of image you want. But if, what we do now is I sit down, I make drawings, and then I go for it. And I don't know where we're going to land, but I haven't crashed in the mountains yet. And then when it's done, I say, okay, well, I've taken your idea, I've worked it up. If you don't like it, no sweat, I'll sell it to somebody else. So, you haven't had the worry of what, have I invested wisely in this guy? And so, most times people say, yeah, it's just what I wanted. So,
well, you can always shove it in a burn box and send it off to you.
I'm sadly she's not my agent anymore, but I've got through that. I'm a bit, it's, because I'm not a fan of my own work. So, it's just that, can you produce it, that sort of shit? And
I understand that sentiment entirely.
And sometimes you ride through that. Somehow I've got through that, I think I've evolved through that, and I just, I'll leave this for 6 months and so forth. And sometimes I look at something that, at this particular moment, I've got all these bags, and I'm just I've got these Japanese pens, and I'm just drawing on bags, putting faces of vicious dogs and vicious rabbits on them. And I'm having a lot of fun. I don't know what I'm going to do with them because they're all vicious. Normally I write, this is a seriously bad drawing of a vicious rabbit. So I've now done one rabbit and two vicious dogs. And I thought, well, it's a bag, you can put things in it. But that's a way you just let off steam, as long as I'm making marks and a loose mark gives me understanding of a tight mark and so forth. Yeah. It's a continual sort of counterpoint process, as with a piece of music, the way you sort of go into these, you have a fugue and the riffs and so forth. And it's, Kandinsky did that, the wonderful, when he was playing with even his abstract sounds, even abstract forms have a geometric structure to them, sort of. And so it's this idea of playing with ideas and allowing yourself to play and not think too hard, but just actually feel for it. And it's almost a process of possession, I think.
Reminds me, one
time people do that.
I had a denim jacket once and some marker pens, and I drew a big tiger on the back of the jacket, and I thought, this looks cool. Just loads of imagery and flowers and tigers and things, and I thought, this is the best thing. I'm going to wear this always. And then I went around a friend's house. He had a white sofa which I sat down on, and when I got up, what's left behind on the sofa? And that's the beginning and the end of me drawing on items of clothing and fabrics. I learned my lesson there.
Oh, well, these are special Japanese pens I found, because my son is an artist. He's about to have an exhibition in Glasgow, and he wanted to just play with something, and so I found these pens from Japan. And people use them to decorate plimsolls and things.
Oh yeah, I've seen people do things like that. Yeah.
They're great. I mean, they're really good. They you shake them and then they almost intoxicate you. I don't know what's in them, but they work. They're quite vivid. So, but for a while, I did a lot of anything just to sort of the counterpoint to drawing tight, and then just doing something silly, which is almost kind of childlike in its structure. So you really have to throw the net wide, and everything you do, it all feeds back into the into that core process. Because if you draw loose, then you understand tightness better, and vice versa. And I say to people, just do it. Just do it. Don't hamstring yourself. If you want to start a comic, just start drawing and go with it. Find out about mark making. Let the marks dictate terms and so forth.
Absolutely.
You'll introduce your own little stops and starts as you go along, but you've got to make the mistakes. Nobody ever did anything worthwhile without, I think as Einstein said that, nobody ever did anything worthwhile without making mistakes.
No, you're absolutely agree with that.
So I always say to people, just do it. Just give yourself a lesson. Don't get into a sort of judgment situation straight away. Just do it and leave it for a while, and then come back to it. And you suddenly think, that worked. I can use that, etc. But it's just actually releasing people from these their mental straitjackets they're in. And I think when you find
go back
people,
to some of my half-finished projects now after that. Actually, no,
and even if you mixed, if you were doing a Ralph, if you're working on your digital program, you suddenly mix that up with some hand-drawn pen work. The counterpoint visually would be quite, very exciting. And I think that's why I love Ralph, because he did a Kickstarter recently, Coney Island. And it's the same thing, you get this sort of interplay of, you think, you can't ignore it. You don't have to, some people may not like it, but you can't say it's bland or it doesn't sort of deadline. It's so you're waiting. What the hell's going to happen next? And I just find it this sort of almost anarchic, chaotic interplay of things quite suddenly the start. And that was with his roller scope. You suddenly get this film, The Black, and kind of works on you emotively in a very the things in the film Zulu and then Eisenstein. And it's still, when you see it, it's still, kind of, but I mean, when it was made, I wasn't I don't think I was a great fan of it, but I think over the years I've become far more appreciative of it and what it actually represents, in terms of animation. And Ralph, of course, is still forcefully out there talking. I mean, I don't know if you ever listened to any of Ralph's interviews, but they're very interesting.
I just bet I'll have to go and listen to a few.
I don't know if I've kept on point here. Yes, and he did have his dissenters. And when I was working on Cool World, I heard that he chased some. I didn't go out to Las Vegas. I went out when they were in Pasadena, but he chased somebody off set. But then we used to argue, and people used to be frightened because nobody argued with Ralph, and there he was, he arguing with me, and people, I could see they were trepidation. God, how dare he? What's Ralph going to do? Him saying that to him,
I've heard every time you hear an interview about, certainly famously difficult directors and things, some people will say, "Oh, you found it very difficult to work with this person," but people who are on the wavelength of difficult people and mesh with them always say, "Oh no, it was fine. We had a great relationship." So maybe it's like that.
Yeah. Well, I never found him. I mean, the thing with Ralph, he was very emotive. I mean, some people used to say, the films used to use the term scattergun to describe his films. Well, it's a bit derogatory. But I mean, it's all the eye of the beholder. I mean, there's always going to be somebody that doesn't like what you do. There's always going to be somebody that's going to find fault. But I personally, we used to have sort of all sorts of, interactions. I mean, I think he used to find me a trial, but then I was younger, and I suppose I was, I had a poisonous dwarf mentality then, So I was bolshy, and there were stories that I wouldn't possibly tell you, nothing to do with Ralph directly, but about the politics in studios. And so it's a strange industry to be in. I mean, you meet some astonishingly talented people, which is wonderful, and that's one of the great things of it. You do really meet some. I mean, Barry Jackson, who came in to work on Lord of the Rings, and I'm not sure he worked on Wizards. And when I've worked on other things, it's always been the similar crew, the same people. And they're lovely people. They're absolutely super people. And work, you're working with the best, in the industry, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that there's something very nice about that. And this film, I've just done an interview. I think I mentioned to your American friend. It seemed very similar to this, with this French director who's been introducing, also did a big interview with Ralph and Mobius and Crumb and all the big comic artists of the 60s. And I was quite impressed when he asked me. I thought, Christ, these are the people I've admired all my life as well, so it'd be very interesting to see him, and he's coming back to do, he wants to do Roger Dean and I together. And Roger and I have known each other. I love Roger to bits. I don't know what's going to happen, because it can get a bit funny when Roger and I are together, But no, it's all right. Because Roger has views, and I don't necessarily agree with. So, but I think Nicholas wants that and all to go into this film. So I'm looking forward with great interest to seeing what happens. Because some of the other Duryea, I want to see, because they telling about his interview with him in Paris, and what other artists were saying, and you think, yeah, I agree with that. That's interesting. So I'm quite looking forward to seeing. And I said to him when he'd done the interview, I said, God Almighty, I hope you're going to edit some of this. I think I made him laugh a lot, so it seemed to be that he wants to come back and get another boat.
Oh, I'm sure it'll be fine.
Well, I mean, it's just kind of a box full of bollocks, really. Kind of, but there's grist, grist, mill, and all that. So
yeah.
But I don't. where are we with questions? Because we got off track here.
Well, listen,
you get this verbal diarrhea situation.
No, it's been wonderful because you've actually answered a lot of stuff I wanted to ask about the experience and the process, and your take on the artistic process as well. This is all stuff I wanted to know, so I'm glad you've been able to talk about it. That's wonderful. I mean, we've been going for nearly an hour now. I'm afraid I'm going to have to let you go. Yeah. We have to put this into an episode, you see, so that people can sit and listen to it. And I would love to just keep talking all day.
Do you think people actually want to listen to this?
Well, we hope so. I mean, you put stuff out there.
I'm talking about myself here, not other. Kind of it's sometimes kind of. I did an interview with some Indian art magazine. The girl interviewed me with a phone, and when I read what she'd written, I thought, "Oh Jesus, that it sounded like utter prat."
Well, you know what? I would want to listen to it, and so if it makes me happy, then I'm going to put it out there, and that's all that really matters. Because
let me, as an appendage, let me say that kind of most of the people that do what they do, they're all pretty nice people. There's the odd arse, But most of the people that do what they do well are very amiable and, approachable people. I mean, it's some people from Australia said I've become a recluse. Well, I'm not a person to big crowds anymore, and I do like to be quiet. But, I am available, and I'm very interested in the process and other people's processes. So if people, have a sensible answer, I'm always happy to sort of, if I have the time or the thing, but always happy to sort of answer questions or try and help people, because I was lucky enough to be helped by people that were generous enough, spirited enough to give me advice when I needed it. And I feel duty bound to to be it's not to say I've been noticed something, come visit, I'm taking in strays, but I do find that what the nice thing is that suddenly discovering that I'm still relevant. And I've been doing this a long time, and that people still feel I've got something to contribute, and that is what makes one go on.
Yeah, and for the record, you're very much still relevant, and people are.
Yeah,
I've a friend of mine who's working on playtesting with Games Workshop. When I said I was speaking to you, he said, "Oh, Realms of Chaos," and immediately. He knew, and he was interested. So yeah, absolutely, you're very much still relevant, and it's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you very much for taking the time with me like this.
And that's good. And I've got one of my book is coming up soon.
Oh yes,
The Broken Diary. I don't know when it's coming. It's supposed to be republished, but it's a load. Now that is a load of bollocks. But it was just an experiment. I didn't know I knew so many words. There's no pictures in it. It's just a broken diary. It's part real, part... And it's not chronological. I actually decided I didn't want to be chronological, as diaries are. But that was interesting in terms of just exploring, the vagaries of the mind. And I did it that it was a creative exercise as a counterpoint to drawing. So hopefully that'll be available again soon. I think you can still get copies of it. I think it's you get a copy by. I haven't got any, funnily enough. You can get it by demand. I think it's printed by one of these.
Oh right, yeah.
So if you actually want to read something that's probably would be better off propping up a table with one short leg, it's available out there somewhere.
Right, I'll have a look for that.
It's called the Broken Diary. And it's probably it's a very dysfunctional tome, I have to say.
Well, all the best tomes are.
No, not as dysfunctional as this. But I mean, these are things. And all I can say to you is on your comic. You think I just looking at it. I think about that, about counterpointing the way some of the images fall on the pages. So when you turn the page, there's a sudden visual shock, in terms of the sort of the. That runs with the story. I mean, it might be something you have no desire to do and you're happy with the format. But I always tell people experiment, try, mixing it up and things. And then you sort of turn a page and it's gone from when you go from colour just to black and white, when it happens in films like The Wizard of Oz. Starts off in black and white, then turns to vivid colour. Such a simple device, but it's memorable. And sometimes you can use very, very simple mechanisms to sort of create dramatic interlude or dramatic counterpoint. I'm very much for that. Think outside the box, as they say.
Oh, lovely.
But I will get back to, once I've actually had time to sit down. Tomorrow is my reading day, catching up with all the things that are coming. I'll get back to you.
Well, like I say, don't expect it to make much sense because it's all very incoherent, but deliberately so. It's not an accident. That's very much within the realms where I exist. So don't worry about that. Thank you. Well, once again, thank you very much for your time.
I am actually, do you? I've got a bloody rabbit in the drain outside.
Oh no!
At me again, I'll have to go. Yeah. Well, he bit the. Well, my dog's dead now, but last couple of years ago, he bit the dog. Bastard thing, It was only when there was snow and I was banging ice, and he came up and bit the dog. So
rabbits can be vicious. Teeth. I had a rabbit once, and it was very territorial. Didn't like me at all.
I never thought Watership Down would come out as an Elm Street in the grid outside my front door. Oh well, Oh well. Okay, right. I'm getting. I can see that I'm losing the plot here. I'm beginning to. Yeah. Well, listen. Keep in touch.
I will.
You want to. You don't need a particular reason. Just you want to talk or. Just send me an email. I will reply. Not to.
Thank you very much. I would gladly so. I'd love to keep talking.
Well, keep in touch. There's absolutely no reason. I'm really all on my own. Well, I'm not actually. My wife's downstairs, but
good.
She's not going to talk to me till 3:00. So
fair play.
Banished. Yes, when she unlocks the door and lets me out. Okie dokie then.
All right then. Well, thanks a lot once again.
Nice talking to you. Well, I hope that helps.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's been brilliant talking to you. Thanks a lot for all your time.
Yeah. Okay.
Bye bye then.
Well, I'll be here from you soon.
Bye bye.
Bye.
The Cinemania Society will return in 1 week for the conclusion of its Season 1 finale. This episode was written and produced by Andy Slack and Ethan Ireland. Special thanks to Ian Miller for generously agreeing to participate. Music by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Email us at theCinemaniaSociety@gmail.com or visit our subreddit at r/theCinemania Society. The Cinemania Society is a product of the Cinemania Society, LLC.